the idea like a financial budget. Like a financial budget where you have a certain allocation of carbon that is allotted to you, and you can only make decisions and spend that carbon up to your budget. We know we need to significantly decrease the use of natural gas in home heating, and our colleagues in the and my colleagues on our team are looking at doing that for new construction and existing buildings. They're also looking at establishing performance targets for existing buildings. And that's all outlined in an existing building strategy report. What I think we're here today to talk about is buildings, but also about increasing low carbon transportation options. So that involves a significant uptick in the use of electric vehicles, but also in the use of transit and walking and cycling. And finally, in order to accommodate, if we're going to electrify our buildings and transportation systems, we need to make sure that there's a robust availability of local renewables and storage. So the net zero strategy does a few things. I've touched on a few of them already. First, it establishes a new, very ambitious target. We're aware it's ambitious. Target for net zero by 2040. That's only 18 years away. So think about somebody born today is going to be graduating high school in a net zero world, and that's our goal. We've also established more detailed sector-based targets, which I'll go over in just a minute, for 2030. Again, 2030 is our big target year. We need to basically have the emissions that we have today by 2030 in order to reach that target. We've also set a nearer term target for 2025, which is to reduce emissions by 45% over 1990 levels. We've also outlined a little bit more detail. We've got 30 short-term actions that we're targeting between now and 2025, which is our next report back year, that'll take place in all kinds of the different sectors. So what are those 2030 goals? We've got a couple of them. The top two are dealing with buildings. So top left, you'll see there for 2030, we're targeting that all new developments are built near zero emission, GHG emissions. And of course, this is tracks alongside the implementation of the Toronto Green Standard, which my colleague Lisa will talk a little bit more detail about next. We're also looking at halving emissions from existing buildings. And again, there's a net zero or existing building strategy that was released last summer, which is tracking this as well. The next two in kind of green there are a target that half of our energy will come from renewable or low carbon sources, and that 25% of commercial and industrial floor space is connected to low carbon thermal. Of relevance to this group, we've also got a target for a 30% registered vehicles within the city boundaries are electric. So again, this is by 2030, and as you may know, we're hovering under 5% right now. So getting to 30% is going to be quite an ambitious goal. We're also targeting that by 2030, 75% of short trips, those trips under 5 kilometers, and mainly those commuting trips, so to school or to work, are taken by bike, by foot, or by transit. And finally, we're also looking for waste, that 70% of waste is diverted from our landfills. So the city has an electric vehicle strategy. It was passed right before COVID in January 2020, and it lays out a number of different kind of action areas of focus, and it also established targets. And so you'll see them listed here: a 5% registered vehicles by 2025. At the time when it was passed, it had a goal of a 20% registered vehicles by 2030. That's been updated in the latest report from 2021, just from December. So it's now 30%, as I just described, and 100% by 2040. You'll see here on the right as well the federal targets, and so those are for percentage of new sales. And so the kind of big one to think about is that they've set a target that by 2035, 100% of new sales will be zero emission vehicles. As I mentioned, the EV strategy lays out a number of areas of opportunity. So there are 4 big ones. First is around charging availability, cost and convenience, education and advocacy, and economic opportunities. And of course, today we're here to talk about charging availability. And we know from talking with residents, and I'm sure talking with your partners and your colleagues as well, you know that availability is one of the top barriers to adoption. And I think that's what we're here to talk about today. So I took you through a pretty quick whirlwind of Transform TO. I'm not sure if we're taking questions now or at the end. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Lisa.
Maybe we'll wait.
We'll wait? Okay, great.
Unless anybody has a pressing question.
Yes. Oh, you don't. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll be around, so feel free to grab me if you've got a question.
Sophie's taller than me. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I think I was waving to the one person I recognized in the room. It's so nice to see everybody in person again. I'm just getting used to it. I don't know about you, but I just basically got here by the skin of my teeth, getting used to driving out there again. Oh my God. Anyway, I'll be pretty quick. I just wanted to give kind of an introduction to what we are doing with respect to land use planning and electric vehicle infrastructure to kind of set the stage for the next presentation. So I'm with City Planning Division, and there are a couple tools that we're using to require EV infrastructure, so that kind of ramp up of the charging availability. We've been using the Toronto Green Standard as one of those tools since about 2010 to introduce this idea of having charging available in parking spaces. Started with pretty low levels, and then by, I think it was 2018, we were requiring 20% spaces having EVSE or energized outlets. We kind of became a little more flexible about that, and rough-ins. And it's the last few years really where, you know, the majority of the work has been done, in particular with respect to the AES costing study that I think Brendan will touch on a bit in the next presentation. And we talked to developers, we talked to, you know, different stakeholders about how we could ramp up these requirements and what was the readiness there. And that combined with the city's EV strategy directing us in city planning to have higher requirements for this, and the trending that was happening out there in terms of EV uptake, what we need to do in terms of addressing our climate change mitigation actions. What we did was we ramped up in Toronto Green Standard version 4, which has just come into effect, 100% EV ready requirements for residential spaces, and then 25% for non-residential spaces. So that's in building parking for the most part, unless it's a city facility where we're expecting them to also address at grade parking lots. So the second thing, the big thing that happened at the same time was that the our zoning bylaw was being updated for its parking requirements and re-looking at whether we needed to have minimum parking requirements anymore. And we have Michael Hain, who led that exercise here. If you want to just raise your hand there, Michael, with the city's City Planning Division Transportation section. A lot of, you know, data analysis and so on went into the idea that we would actually reduce and eliminate most minimum parking requirements. So hand in hand with that, we also thought, well, this is a good time to introduce EV requirements into the zoning bylaw. And what that does is it adds extra authority and clarity to those requirements. So you see the same requirements in both the zoning bylaw requirements. So a zoning amendment comes through, they'll have to apply those requirements, the 100% or 25% for other uses, then replicated or reinforced through the Toronto Green Standard, which tends to apply a little later through site plan control, something we call site plan control. So we're using our approvals process, or planning approvals process, to require the energized outlets in these spaces, or EVSE if someone wants to do that. I can't remember what I had on this slide. Oh, there's just the requirements. Okay. So the idea is that EV ready is that idea of the provision of the energized outlet capable of providing level 2 charging. So that's the minimum level that has to be provided, the 240 volts. And we also encourage the use of EV EMS, so energy management systems, load sharing, because we're not looking for dedicated outlets to every single space. And that's partly to do with cost effectiveness, cost efficiencies, as well as it's not necessary in most cases. So just to say again that, you know, Toronto Green Standard version 4, it's consistent with the new zoning bylaw amendment regulation, which has come into effect, correct, Michael? It's in effect now, yeah? Well, sorry, it's under review. There's some appeals going on, okay, but just assume it's in effect. And it's looking for, the 100% EV ready with load sharing. EV EMS is encouraged, 25% for non-residential uses. And then we've also introduced a requirement for electric bikes, because we also see the need to have charging facilities available for bicycles too, which I see out the showroom there. Now, we do want to provide some guidance, more technical guidance to applications going forward. And that's part of what this workshop will input into. So helping you figure out what are the best configurations, for example, what are the most cost-effective configurations, and answer some of those technical questions you might have within a document. The way we verify and enforce these requirements is through the planning process, as I mentioned. So through the regular plans and drawings that are submitted. So on the parking plans, and we've always asked for this through TGS reviews, we're looking for the statistics on, how many EV outlets are being provided. We're looking for the level of charging and performance standard in the notations. Then those plans are secured within the agreement. So the approvals of the site plan control permit the application. That's the way that we're doing that right now. We may add some other things sort of later in the process. If it's a higher performance building, it's also checked through construction stage plans, and then at occupancy, there would be inspections as well, like if it was what we call a tier 2 or above high performance building. And everything on the TGS is found on the TGS website. All the performance standards are there. So it's not just EVs and low emissions transportation, it's in building energy and emissions performance. It's a lot of things, ecology, solid waste reduction, a lot of different performance measures, but all for new construction. That's what we can affect within planning. So I'm sure the issue of retrofits will also come up today. So I hope that gives you just a bit of an overview of what we can do with the TGS and the city planning permit or approval processes anyway. And with that, I will pass things over to Brendan, who's going to get into the juicy good stuff. Yeah.